Evening, welcome to the June 21, 22 Finance Committee of the Whole meeting. I'm going to call this meeting. I'm going to need a motion to suspend the video conferencing of the meeting of the whole and everyone's on Zoom. We have no speakers tonight listed. Let's see, board docs. We have lots of minutes tonight to get through, so I'm going to just read them all and then I'll ask for the motion. But let me read all of the minutes and the dates that we have for all of them because they include our budget hearings. So I need a motion to review and accept the minutes from the February 21st, 2022 financial count. For the minutes of the March 15th Finance Committee of the Whole presentation of the District and East EPO Superintendent 22-23 budget. The minutes from the March 22nd, 22 Financial Committee of the Whole for the presentation of the District and East EPO Superintendent budget. A review and acceptance of the minutes from the April 14th budget hearing. So I'll ask for that motion now. I think that includes all of the minutes at that point. Can I get a motion?
Motion.
So that is, I heard Commissioner Adams motion it, Patterson seconded.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Adams, can you turn your camera on real quick, just so you can say the aye so we can accept it, please, and thank you. Thank you. You got that, Kalia?
I did, thank you.
Thank you. Up next, I am actually except for one resolution, because of the amount of resolutions that we're gonna be getting in the next couple of weeks and months, honestly, because of CRESA and ARP. This is a packet of 126 resolutions. And so it would take us all evening if we went through it in this process. So because of that, I am asking commissioners to review it and submit questions to the question log. But please make sure you're reviewing them because there are, again, lots of resolutions in there, some new things coming up and some things that we should be questioning. It's just a massive amount of them coming, not just this meeting, but the next one as well. But however, there is one particular resolution that I am going to ask Mike to come on camera very quickly and speak to, and that is a budget modernization phase 3, and what has to happen with those dollars to be loaned to the FMP board until they're able to go out and secure their own bonding and funding and then return the funding back to us. But I'll let Mike explain it. It's coming up and it's a budget transfer request and loan. Mike?
Yes, good evening, Vice President O'Brien, President Elliott, Superintendent and Commissioners. Obviously brevity is powerful. So in the packet for this Thursday night, the 23rd of June, I believe right now it's slated as Resolution E. There is a facility modernization resolution that is in a sense, a cash advance from the district to the joint board. The backup documents really lay out how that money will be utilized by the joint board. There are really two different pieces in the executive summary, and then there's a very detailed outline of the tasks and the deadlines that will need to be accomplished. This is in alignment with our work session that we had, I think it was about 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago in regards to modernization. And what you will see in that is that we're laying out a pathway for you to be able to view the phase 3 master plan. Right now we're thinking, at least by the calendar in front of you, would be at the November Finance Committee meeting or somewhere in that window. And then with your opportunity to vote on the master plan and the financial plan at the December Board of Education meeting. There's a lot of variables in play here between now and then. So that's certainly not set in stone. But the calendar you see does lay out beginning with the end in mind, working from those dates along the way. You'll also see a number of community meetings identified. That may not be all the community meetings that we'll be doing along the way. And you also will see some a series of meetings with the with the board, and that was some feedback from the previous work session around some additional work sessions throughout the late summer and early fall as we begin to update you on our status going forward. So this, I describe it very quickly as this is the technical side. I use the example of being two different trains. This is, I'll refer to it as the A train. This is going to deal with most of the nuts and bolts of putting this plan together and the corresponding financial plan. The other side of this would be that, which is not what the money would be utilized for, is for our own internal decisions led by our superintendent and other members of our organization, working in conjunction with stakeholders throughout the community, where we have a lot of internal decisions to make that would be in alignment with this. So there'll be a consistent amount of updates that'll be, we're referring to that as the B train affectionately. So those will be running simultaneously. Many more updates to come in regards to that. The advancement of cash is for $1 million. We have built in, make sure I have the numbers in front of me. Sorry, President. Ron, the master plan, the base of this right now, we're looking at about a $570,000 price tag. This is all I've seen in your backup materials. We've built in a 20% contingency. And then we've also asked for a set aside of about $300,000 for some unknowns that the joint board may run into over the next 6 or 7 months so that we can deal with those variables as they may arise. We're doing a lot of engineering and test fits and things in the buildings, and you just don't know what you're going to uncover. And this will allow us the flexibility to take on any unforeseen circumstance and be able to deal with that to bring you a comprehensive master plan in the late fall and early winter. The last piece of the puzzle, so to speak, is and I mentioned to this earlier, there may be other topics that the board may have to address either by resolution, and as those arise, certainly with working with Superintendent Myers-Small, that we'll inform accordingly and work from there. So this is, I would say, this is a collaboration, very different from, and well, I shouldn't say very different. It's we have some parameters that have been laid out to us from the State Education Department, and Dr. Jallo is our liaison on those. And much more detail to come in our next work session. We have not actually scheduled that yet, but and we can provide much more backup and so forth. But the materials attached to the resolution are pretty comprehensive in nature. And I certainly, if any questions arise between now and Thursday, you certainly have available in the question log, or with the superintendent's permission, you can certainly contact me directly, whatever is more convenient for you.
Are there any questions so far? Because that resolution is coming to the board by Thursday for the budget transfer. Commissioner Adams?
Did you say Dr. Jallo is the liaison for that?
Certainly, yes. We've had some conversations with actually extensive conversations with the leadership at State Ed, Commissioner and her cabinet, that have given us some feedback about what they would like to see with us going forward in this plan. So, and Dr. Jallo has been in all of those. So probably I wouldn't want to use the term liaison, may not be the correct word, Commissioner Adams, but she certainly is in the room with us as we're discussing the different facets of the technical side of this, but also on the institutional decisions that we're going to need to make in conjunction with this.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, President Elliott?
Yeah, I'd just like to say that the FMP meetings are open to the public. So commissioners, you are allowed to attend those meetings. They're usually the second Monday of the month around 4 o'clock. And so feel free to, I believe, Mike, those meetings are in person as well as on Zoom. So
Yes,
if you'd like to participate in those meetings, feel free to do that. It is a $475 million project. For this phase, we're talking about the renovation of schools. So you may want to participate in those discussions with the FMP board. Now, there is no voting rights that we have other than the 7 members who have been appointed to the board, but we certainly have an opportunity to ask questions and be able to just help to influence the process. So thank you.
Thank you, President Elliott. And then just to remind everyone, but also the public listening, whether you're listening now or later, that we are required to have public hearings on these plans and get input. And so there will be more information as to which schools are going to be renovated, what ideas you all may have, especially for those who are at Franklin. I know the students and staff have lots of ideas, and you guys are on the list for this phase. I just want to put it out there, but I know that there are other opportunities for this entire community to give input on those plans. Commissioner Patterson?
Yes, Mike said that if we had further questions, we could also sit down with him and he could further explain, provide an explanation. So I'd just like to let him know I'll be reaching out to him just to sit down for, further clarification.
Absolutely, Commissioner.
All right, thank you. Thanks, Mike. And if anything comes up when you should have seen the resolution, I hope by now that it was sent out with the materials like Mike mentioned. But if not, we'll make sure that you get it because the vote will happen on Thursday at the board business meeting. But thanks, Mike.
You're quite welcome. Thank you, everyone.
And then up next is going to be our CFO Interim Byrne to do the financial report for the May 2022 unaudited financial reports and trend analysis report. And then Byrne, I'm turning it over to you.
Thank you. So in this month's report package, it follows the usual format. The first item gives a cash balance, and we ended the month of May with $177 million, just over $177 million cash. That's a reduction from the beginning of the month of $242 million, but please keep in mind that we do a lot of bond payments in the month of May, so that's why that number is decreased. Looking at the projections for year end, we're anticipating ending the year with a cash balance of slightly over $211 million. You can see that on page, I believe, 6, Calia. Right there, just down a little bit. The other way. Go down just previous page. There you go. So yeah, we're looking right now. If you look in May, the green highlighted number is where we are with our cash balances. Remember, that's a general ledger cash balance. The number on the previous page is a little higher because it's a bank balance. But typically, we have a number of checks in transit at month end. And that's why our bank balance is always a little higher than our general ledger balance. But this is kind of true cash. And you can see that we're looking to have about $211 million on hand, just over $211 million on hand at the end of June. So we're in a very strong cash position. If you want to go back up to the top, page 1, very top. Down just slightly so we can see item C. Thank you. So what were two big things in terms of additional revenues? One is food service. Received a $505,000 one-time supply chain assistance revenue and $380 million in federal reimbursements. And when we go further, we will get into the more detailed food service report. In general fund, what we saw was an influx of E-rate revenues, about $272,000. So we go to the next page, please. Just at the top of the page right there. You can see where we are here from revenues. The general fund was budgeted at $840 million. We're projected at $834 million and change. Keep in mind that those numbers include $33.1 million of appropriated fund balance. So we're really looking to come in this year with actual cash coming in or revenue coming in of about $800 million for the general fund. Food service, you can see that the special aid, the grants fund, the original budget was 121.8 million. It's now been adjusted to 422.7 million. Reason being the addition of the ARP, the American Rescue Plan, and CRISA funding. And then in school food service, the original budget was 23.9 million. We're looking to come in with about 22.3 million. So I didn't quite hit that budget on the revenue side, but when we get to the expenditure reports just below, you'll see that they're going to run a surplus. So we're looking at item D, the expenditures. Again, the budget is at 840 million. Less encumbrances, less expenditures through the end of May leaves us with about 121 million. Still working on the numbers, but I'm estimating our general fund expenditures to come in at the range of 800 million to 810 million. I think next month we'll have more refined numbers for you there. So I don't anticipate using the full 33.1 million of fund balance. It was in the budget this year, but still a lot of work to be done before we get to the final number. If we switch over to the special aid and the grants fund, you can see the budget appropriations is 422 million. Less encumbrance and expenditures leaves us 273 million. And that is largely both on the revenue side and the expenditure side for the special aid fund is unused ARP and CRISA money that will continue over the next couple of years. And as always, remember the special aid fund by definition does not run a surplus or a deficit. And we only recognize the revenue when we have the actual expenditures that we can then be reimbursed for. The school food service fund, the original budget was 23.9 million, less encumbrances and expenditures. Brings us to 4.8 million of unused money as at the end of May. And when we get to the end of the reports, we'll have a more detailed projection for the school food service fund. So before I go any further, that was a lot of information. Is there any questions about any of this information?
President Elliott?
Thank you, Vice President LeBron. So with regard to the cash, what plans are there for us to appropriate that extra cash? And as part of that we can put the 10 million back into the fund balance that we had used to balance the budget. So what other plans are we going to employ in order for the cash? And what is a, Vern, let me just also put this in there. What is a healthy, how much really is a healthy cash position? How much do we need to have on hand just in case something happens and we don't have to use our fund balance?
I think ideally you would want to have 2 to 3 months cash availability. And given that we're a $1 billion organization, that would put us in the 200 million. 2 months would be 1/6. I can do math really quickly, which my math is failing me. Should be easy. 6. It'd be about, you would want to have for 2 months, you probably want to have about 150 to 175 million dollars on hand.
Okay.
And that's important because if there's any disruptions in cash flow, then it wouldn't impact operations. We can make payroll, we can pay our bills, we can meet all of our obligations. So that's kind of where you'd like to be with cash on hand, at least 2 months. 2 to 3 months is good. The second part of your question, essentially, we only use the cash to carry out the plans that are approved by the board in the budget process. So essentially, I think you're referring to the $10 million use of fund balance in the coming year budget. Essentially, what we would need to do to address that and it'd be a little premature at this time because I'm still trying to get a sense of what is our actual cost basis, okay? And I've completed the non-staffing piece of it. I got a pretty good handle on, the expenditures like charter school tuition, debt service, things of that nature, operating supplies, and what have you. I'm still trying to get a real good handle on where we are staffing wise, okay? From that, then, when we got a good feel for the base, you got to remember the last few years have been anything but normal with the ups and downs with COVID. So looking back at prior years isn't as instructive as it would normally be. This year being more or less the best, normal year, if you will. So once we have that, then we can look at the next year's budget and look at how well that's constructed. Will we have money to cover utilities, because we're seeing a lot of cost increases in that. Do we have enough money for charter school kids? And up and down the whole thing, and then for staffing. And what is the impact for our, if we cannot do full staffing, what's that impact? So that's a long way of saying we have to really analyze that. And then based on that, can we do a budget amendment? Where we feel confident in our cost structure and what revenues are coming in, that we can do a budget amendment to make adjustments to possibly eliminate that $10 million of fund balance from the budget. I would say we would probably want to do, we should be doing a budget amendment in December. By then we'll know where we are. The schools will be up and running. We'll be in a pretty good position to know where we are fiscally. And it would be at that point we could make a pretty good recommendation about adjusting the budget and whether or not we would need that 10 million or if anything for fund balance.
And then just one other question. What's the difference between the title heads that you had there, budgeted versus projected?
So budgeted was what was the adopted budget, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Projected is, where we are now. So basically looking at, what we think we have coming in, from experience, what we've experienced through May, what do we expect to occur? Now we won't, each month that goes by, we'll get closer and closer to what the actual outcome will be. And we only have 1 month left, so to speak. But that's what projected represents. As we go forward next year, if we do formal budget amendments, the formal budget amendments are more or less projections, if you will, at that time. And, we could utilize that in reporting next year if we go down that road.
Thank you.
I don't see any other questions, Vern, so I'm not sure if you were done.
If we can go back to page 3, we've got a couple more items. Going down to item E. There's about 20 pages of budget journal entries. Nothing of major significance. The one thing I'll call out for you, I believe at the Thursday night board meeting, there will be a budget transfer of 2.271 million of money in the CARES Act this year. And what that is to shift money to cover utility cost increases this year because of the run up, and as you're aware, gasoline prices, utility costs, our bills and our costs went up significantly. So we're reallocating money in the CARES Act that we wouldn't use to fund some utilities. And then in the budget journal entries on pages 13 to 23 are a lot of detailed entries that we've done during the month. But I did want to call out the one resolution that'll be coming Thursday night. Any questions about budget journal entries? Okay, if we can move down to right there, thank you. Capital project status, those reports, those detailed reports are on pages 24 to 28. As you're aware from these tables, we have two main sources of funding for capital projects. One is our cash capital allocations. The other is our bonded. And the bonding is basically the facilities modernization program. Under cash capital, you can see that at the end of May, they had 9.6 million left of unused project balance, but they certainly have plans for all that. For the bonded area, we had 15.2 million. And again, a lot of that, the majority of that will be used to finish phase 2 of the facilities modernization program. You go down to the next page, please. These are the significant capital projects upcoming. You can see that all of these projects are for facilities improvement, some demountable partitions at the central office. Those are all the walls and things we use for, renovating and changing the office layout. Franklin, we're doing two things at the Franklin pool. One is to reinforce the pool slab, and the second is to change the liner, to replace the liner on the pool. That's what keeps the pools from leaking. And then the last item, the $1,087,000 is to do the design of upcoming CIP projects, including, you can see All City. The All City project will be some roof work there. So even though we don't have programs there, we still have to maintain the building, so that it does not deteriorate. Are there any questions about the capital projects and their budgets?
I have a question, actually. Can you talk a little bit about how that $9 million is going to be used? And I was under the impression that phase 2 was complete. Was that a misunderstanding on my part?
So if you can go back up to item F, please.
Yes, right there, the 9.6 million. What is that going to be used for?
So that cash capital, that is not part of the facilities modernization. That's part of the capital improvement plan. And that is called out in the capital improvement plan, all the details of those. That's called out in the capital improvement plan document that was distributed and discussed as part of the budget project. And I see Mike stepped up, so he may be able to add more detail to that.
So this 9.6 million was anticipated in that plan?
No, we typically do, we typically allocate 10 million a year in the budget. The city charter requires the district to put at least 10 million toward capital. And this is the money that goes towards CIP, capital improvement projects, which are separate and apart from the facilities modernization.
Yeah, no, I'm not talking about facilities modernization at all. I realize, yeah. I'm just wondering, was this $9.6 million anticipated? Because if it was I'm wondering how you can budget for something and have $9.6 million left over, but be that as it may.
I can certainly speak to that in broad strokes. So if we had a conversation around our change order report about 6 weeks ago, there is contingency about 10% per job. If we do not utilize that contingency, which as you review the change order report, you can see quite often as an overall part of it, we don't. So therefore that money, if we don't utilize it, goes back into our capital fund to be repurposed for other projects. In this year's CIP document, we actually repurposed bond funds and targeted this for several projects in our current CIP that the board just approved in May. So what that 9 million entails is primarily those contingency funds, kind of our savings account, for lack of a better way of saying it. There is some of it that's been earmarked for potential projects. For example, we did most recently we did the restaurant removal and playground development adjacent to World of Inquiry. We utilized earmarked capital funds from contingency for that project. And we have several others that are like that. I can certainly provide
Okay.
more detail, but there's two different parts. One's kind of set aside, a savings account, and then there also are a portion of that that are earmarked for specific projects in the future.
Right, but I thought I heard a statement say that some of it might be used to complete phase 2 projects. Did I mishear
No,
that?
well, I can't speak to that part of it, but I would say this, there is some money that is remaining in the facility modernization budget in phase 2. There are a couple of projects that will be turned over to the district for us to conclude when we have that is a school, the site work at school 4 and at 54. So those with Savin leaving, the program manager leaving on July 31st, those projects will be picked up and completed by our facilities team. And that is the remaining work in phase 2 that needs to be completed. So
I just kind of want consistency, because documents went to SED saying phase 2 was complete. And then I hear, oh, this will be used to complete projects in phase 2. So I'm just looking for consistency here.
Well, let me clarify the numbers. So in the 2 columns, the cash capital, the 9.6 million is what Mike just described for
Yes, yes.
The bond column, the borrow money is the facilities projects. So that 15.2 million will be used to do final payouts on those projects. So the work is largely done. There's still some punch work list, but we have the certificates of occupancy.
Okay.
And then there'll be final payouts and miscellaneous things like as Mike just said, that the bonded money will be used for the facilities modernization.
Okay.
And that money can only be used for that purpose. It was borrowed for that purpose. Right. So when we're done, all the bills have been paid, everything's been buttoned up. If there's any money left there, that money can only be used to pay down those debts, those borrowings for that
from
project.
phase 2.
Correct. They cannot be appropriated for any other purpose.
Okay. So do you think you have $15 million worth of punch list items for phase 2?
I think the number, we probably have about 10 million or 11 million. I'd have to pull my file from our meeting last week.
So I don't need that now, but if we could figure that out later, that would be.
Yeah, we'll send you the latest report from the RJSCB, because I provided that at our meeting last week. I just don't have it at my fingertips.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions about capital?
I don't see any hands up, Vern. I'm trying to monitor and multitask on the screen.
Well, we only got 2 more and then I'm done. 2 more items. So Callie, if you can go all the way to the second to last page, because these are the last 2 items and there are detailed reports there. Right there. Oops, you almost had it. So this is a projection, and keep in mind, while this is the projection at the end as of the end of April. So this projection report from food service trails a month, because what they like to do is they like to get in their reimbursements, and typically federal and state reimbursements come a month later. That's why this report reads April. That's not a typo. But based on where food service was looking to be at the end of April, they're projecting revenues of 22.3 million, expenses of 19.4 million, a profit and loss this year of just under 3 million. And if you look in the red box at the bottom, if you backed out just the one-time revenue, because we got some significant pandemic relief, and it's detailed at the bottom of the page there. Basically from operations, it's pretty much a break-even year, but it looks like they'll have a surplus this year of in the neighborhood of 3 million. Now remember, any surpluses for the food service program by law can only be used for that program. And if you recall, when we adopted this coming year's budget, we allocated 1 million to support the enhanced food service program. We allocated 1 million of fund balance, a food service fund balance, and 1.5 million of support from the general fund. So remember, when we talked about that plan, we wanted to be able to support it for at least 3 years. So this surplus of 3 million will be able to allow the program as necessary to allocate $1 million of food service fund balance each year, so that we can maintain that program that everybody adopted, that the board voted on and adopted it there during the budget deliberations. Any questions about food service fund balance and revenues and expense?
I don't see any hands up, Brian.
Okay, and then the last item. This is just a report on charter school, the charter school tuition budget. And if you go down to the lower right-hand corner, you can see that our budget was 101.5 million, projected expense was 95.3 million. So it looks like we'll have a favorable surplus in that budget just on this area of 6.2 million. So this is a significant piece of, remember I said the overall budget's about 840 million, and we look like we're going to come in at about 800 million. This explains 6.2 million of that difference. And the last thing I'd like to point out to you, if you look across the top, the payment dates. So we've already made all the 6 payments to the charter schools. So what we do is we do one last reconciliation over the summer, because the payments each time are based on the enrollment on that date. And there's a final reconciliation based on overall enrollment for the entire year and smoothing it out. So you can see that of the 95.3 million, all but 842,000 of it's been paid. And then the line below that just shows what the previous year's experience was. So is there any questions about charter school tuition? Because this right here is 10% of our budget. So this is kind of an important number to keep track of.
I don't see any hands, Brian, and I would just want to add that it's a very important number, because we have also been cited in the past for an audits around not appropriately budgeting for that budget item line. So I'm glad that things have turned around a little bit, if you will, because we have not seen a positive in that budget item line in a while. So thank you. At this time, I'm going to ask for a motion for that report to come out of the committee to go to the board business meeting on the 23rd of this month, please.
Motion.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 I'm sorry, whoever seconded was not on camera, so I wasn't able to capture the second.
You took me off camera. I can't get back in.
Hold on one
I
second.
seconded.
We both did, but that's okay.
Okay, I'll take Commissioner Adams because he's on camera right now.
Right.
Thank you.
All those in favor? Aye.
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 Okay. All right. Thank you all. The next one.
Vice President LeBron, you're frozen.
It's for a presentation tonight. I believe it's going to be my.
Vice President LeBron, you're breaking up badly.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you now. You might need to repeat.
I apologize. I am getting a message, internet unstable message. I'm gonna go turn my camera off, but I see Mike joins on video, so I'm gonna leave my video off. Welcome,
everyone.
Mike. He's going to be doing another update for us on the Medicaid reimbursements. And so, Mike, I'm gonna turn it over to.
Thank you, Vice President LeBron. My name is Mike Sells. I'm the Medicaid Compliance Officer for the city school district. I want to thank President Elliott, Superintendent Dr. Mara Small, State Monitor Dr. Jallo, the rest of our management staff today for me to provide you an update regarding the Medicaid presentation. Could we have Kelly, someone share the presentation at this time on the agenda?
Yes, I'm pulling it up right now.
Great, thank you. Great, thank you so much. If we can go to the first slide, please. I want to just start with a summary. Today, we're going to cover a number of items in a little bit more detail, but just to start out, the presentation today will cover the audit that was performed and completed by Metzger and Barnes. That audit covered the school year of 2021, and there was a report that was released on the procedures and documentation and some of the compliance items within the Medicaid department. Second item that I'd like to bring up to today's discussion is an invalid signature issue that we mentioned at last board meeting in June of 2021, and that review has been completed and action has been taken. Other items that we want to discuss is the Medicaid revenue and items that are impacting the Medicaid revenue, not just what we traditionally bill for, but what items that are impacting the additional revenue that is available to the district. And it seems to be a traditional trend of some items that are repeating from year to year and others are new items. But these are 5 items that I picked out from the many validation errors that impact us. These are some of the 5 large items that are impacting us. I also would like to go over today some of the delivery related services and show you pre, during, and after COVID. And then also give you an update on the enhanced Medicaid application and special education application that we're working on with Special Education Department in our IM&T office and rolling that out for the upcoming school year. If we can go to the next slide, please. Medicaid audit was a summary of the audit, basically included 3 different major areas. And those areas, they started by polling 60 students, which the documentation was about over 500 documents supporting the services, the multiple IPs. The second part of the report was about 78 claims that were pulled. And the third part was a lot of the policies, procedures, and reporting within our Medicaid office for the district. There were audit findings that were shared. Most of you should have a copy of that with the presentation today. And they were identified as procedures and items that were identified. And along with, I'd like to mention today, is the corrective action items that we've already started taking. A lot of the items that were identified, we were already beginning to work on. Some items have already been implemented. Some of the ones I would like to point out is the revision of our procedures and documentation in the Medicaid office. But in addition to that is the new preceptive application and the new frontline systems that we're implementing. Preceptive application is going to address the issue for the Medicaid consent documentation and other documentation that we have in the Medicaid office that we use to support the claims that we bill for. The system of the preceptive application is going to help us scan, store, and implement those documents. And when needed for audits, we'll be able to retrieve those documents in an orderly fashion, and they'll be organized from year to year. So we've already implemented that and are currently using it. And in addition, the new enhanced frontline system, we were working closely with special education, IM&T office, and other district management to hopefully have that rolled out by the new school year. And that will also help us address the limited reporting that was identified in this audit. You can go to the next slide, please. Mention about the invalid signatures on our service orders and evaluations when we last met in 2021. What Medicaid states is that the signatures on the orders and evaluations cannot be stamped signatures. They must be original signatures, and they also must be an approved electronic signature. So those are the 2 options to have an approved electronic signature or an original signature. What was found, and that I briefly mentioned in our past board meeting last summer, was where we are finding stamped signatures, pictures of signatures, and other items that were not okay to be submitting claims for within our district's Medicaid reimbursement. What we found these items in June of 2021, and at the same time when we found them, we were previously implementing the AssureSign application, which was in January 2021. So that application was already in place, and we quickly moved over, switching over to finding the areas of the speech orders and the social worker orders, where we now quickly moved over and use that application only to be submitting the service orders, and they can only be electronically signed. So that would help address that issue. Other things that we took corrective action on were that we stopped the claiming and we halted the claiming in June of 2021. We also modified the service order process. So we have a new person on board. All the service orders that were entered and linked within the departments outside the Medicaid office now channel all through the Medicaid office. When they're submitted by the electronic application, they're received, they're audited, and they're also scanned in. So they're used in an electronic system. Our office receives them, we scan them in, and help store those documents so we have them in multiple places and making sure they meet all the requirements. We're also working with the special education department to implement the evaluations. That was a second area that was found having a compliance issue and was halted. The evaluations currently do not have an electronic system to sign those documents. So we're working very closely with the Office of Special Education, the Chief of Special Ed, Desiree Richmond, and she has provided initiative communication to all staff to halt and not use anything other than an original signature or electronic devices that are available for particular areas. In this case, we're talking about the social workers, service orders, and speech therapy service orders. But currently, right now, we don't have an electronic signature implemented for the evaluations. So that's an area that we're going to need to implement as soon as possible and do not have in place. So original signature only can be accepted. Also, as an update, we started claiming. So the audit was completed in March of this year. Claims have gone submitted through. We completed and submitted about $1 million today, and we're hoping to meet our goal, the projected number of 2.1 million that we projected for the current school year. Some of the items that are impacting our Medicaid revenue that I mentioned briefly in the beginning was these 5 items here. We traditionally bill $2.1 million. That's our district share. But these items here are above and beyond. So we can reach much higher amounts. I'll show you in a little while when we get to the charts for the 3-year projections of what we brought in and what we're projecting now. But whenever we bring in additional revenue, these are 5 of the large areas that we're seeing that are impacting us the greatest as of right now. There are other ones that we're addressing, it's much smaller, but these I wanted to bring to your attention. The parental consent, increasing it will definitely increase our potential revenue and also identify students' client identification numbers. We recently started working with Monroe County. I would like to say a special thanks to Vice President LeBron, who helped us reconnect with the county and help identify students' eligibility names and demographic information that wasn't matching. So that was a big help that Vice President LeBron had helped with. Other areas that are impacting us above our average revenue are service orders and prescriptions, IP service documentation, and lastly, agency documentation with psychological counseling. There's some documentation that's required by the district that there was in a prior agreement that we need to revisit that with our district and meeting with our agencies, making sure the area of psychological counseling has all the items needed before we can bill for those services. Next slide, please. This slide here, I wanted to point out, this is going back to one of the items I just mentioned of the prescriptions and service orders. These are gross amounts. So I wanted to share today just to give you a 3-year trend. Again, we generate ×2 this amount, but this is the Medicaid share that is on the table that we cannot bill for due to a validation error that's impacting due to a missing order. That's for the period of time that's on the student's IEP. These are for just the Medicaid eligible students. So if there are kids that are coming into and become eligible, there may be other ones that are not tracked and monitored. These are only the Medicaid eligible students that were reflected in this number here. So currently we have just over $300,000 validations for the current school year related to service orders and prescriptions. Can we go to the next slide, please? We wanted to give you an update on the related service delivery for the 3-year period. So this is showing you the pre-COVID, during COVID, and after COVID. We've highlighted some of the key months in red that show some of the numbers where they dip down low. If you look at the chart for the current 2021 school year, we're seeing that it's reaching almost about 200,000. So it looks about getting back to normal, but we want to track and monitor this very closely. Why I say that is there are still months, if you look at the current school year and compare it to pre-COVID, some of those each month are showing a much lower amount. So there's still slight months that are much lower, and we want to make sure we watch this closely because we did project 2.1 for the current school year, but those numbers need to get back up higher, and hopefully we can reach that goal of 2.1. We still have several months to bill for services. We have about 4 months left. And we'll be looking at those claims very closely and work with the finance office and reporting to them if we see a dip and not be able to reach our projected goal of 2.1 million for this year. We can go to the next slide, please. This slide is just sharing a little information in regards to the enhanced application that we're working on. The current system has a lot of limitations, things that we cannot do and things that we cannot track and monitor very well. The benefits of the new system is going to have a scheduler built in, caseloads will be better to be able to monitor, and tools for staff to review themselves and also management staff. But the reporting overall is supposed to be much more friendlier. The enhanced logs are for the related service logs. They will not only just include the related services that we bill for on the IEP students with IEPs, but it's also going to include options for the district to use as tracking 504 students or services. These are all the non-IEP services. We are working with the state, and hopefully someday we'll also be able to get reimbursed for the non-IEP services. But at the current time, there will be an application that we're working on, and hopefully it'll be rolled out in the upcoming school year in the fall, and we'll have the tools readily available for when we do are able to claim at the state level. Some of the, if we can just go back for one slide, I'm sorry, Kyle. I just mentioned, just as we move into this new application, there will be more readily available information to us. So making sure we have a plan and addressing issues. We have some systems now that are addressing particular issues, but it's supposed to give us a much wider range of information that'll be more specific and it'll be more beneficial to our district. So we do want to have an action plan ready to go as this information comes, because it will identify potentially other areas that we need to address or things that we can report on. But we want to make sure that we give the support needed to the needed system. Next slide, please. This is just a 3-year projection that I wanted to share with you. Again, these are gross amounts. As you can see in the 1920, we went above our traditional 2.1 that we bill for Medicaid reimbursement. And this is the district share. So any of the numbers that you're seeing here are times 2 the amounts. So as you can see how we did much better in the 1920 school year. And a lot of times that is due to some of the 5 items that I shared with you. If we get more parental consent, the number goes up. If we get more services orders, those are above and beyond the traditional 2.1 million that we bill in our district. The 2021 school year, you can see how the majority of the service order issues that took place that had invalid signatures, and most of those took place during the COVID school year. Some were prior, some were after, but the majority of them were impacted on the 2021 school year. And the last column there for 2.1 is what we're projecting. Out of the 2.1, we did bring in $1 million already in the district, and hoping to meet our goal by the end of the year. The last slide that I just want to point out is the CPEs that are required for the school districts who are in the Medicaid program. The CPEs are the certified public expenditures. The requirement is making sure that districts submit the expenditures that are related to the Medicaid program. At this time, we have not received any money. There are 4 years that are owed to our district. I had mentioned to you prior in last presentation in 2021, in addition to not only receiving money, but we're still at a small percentage. So when they do pay us, the districts are only receiving about 13%. The state's receiving the majority of that, about 80%, and the vendors are receiving approximately 7%. So not only we haven't received any money to date for the past 4 years, still the percentage breakdown has not changed, and that's been communicated with our Big 5 organization and try to work forward and make those changes in the future, hopefully. Next slide. And that concludes my presentation. I would like to answer any questions that anyone may have.
Dr. Jallo has her hand up. And President Elliott. So I'm going to call on Dr. Jallo. I saw your hand first. President Elliott, you can go after Dr. Jallo.
Oh, no, President Elliott can go first.
President Elliott is going to be Dr. Elliott, but President Elliott.
Yes, indeed. So my concern is that there has been limited oversight. So I don't know if I should ask this to you, Mike, or to the superintendent. What have we done to provide the oversight that's needed for this program? Because it seems to me that there is just clerical issues, not completing, not putting in, if a client ID or whatever the case may be. So it seems that these records are not being checked. And then there was a slide, Mike, I'll address this to you, where we can go over and beyond the amount of money that we can get. And so what are we doing to try to get those dollars? But I saw that there was some corrective measures in there, but Madam Superintendent, I'm going to direct this to you. Where there's been some lack of oversight in this area. And so how is that being corrected?
Sure, thank you for that, President Elliott, and certainly good evening. So Des has been working very closely with her staff around follow through, holding folks accountability, the progressive discipline process, which we're certainly shifting culture and changing culture. Sometimes, at times, this was not happening. But I can have Des give you some specific examples relative to what they've been doing and how they've been working to hold folks accountable.
Thank you for that. We work very closely with Mike Sousa and his team in running reports, trying to identify areas of concern and then addressing that directly with the staff. I will tell you that chronic absenteeism, staffing shortages, right, impact the ability to deliver services as well. When you're not delivering the services because you don't have the staffing, or sometimes in the past, some of our related service providers were asked to be substitutes. So then they're not providing the service, and that's because of severe staffing shortages. Sometimes schools had no other choice. So that has impacted that. We also have a full-time associate director that works on related services. And she also has a school, but she works closely with Amy Alkowitz and Mike Sousa in running reports. And Mike was great about teaching Tina Milam, who is the associate director, how to run specific reports by department to check on ensuring that the services are being placed in a timely manner, signed off on a timely manner. We've made great growth in that area, but the pieces that Mike is talking about are the more difficult ones. Some of that is related to anniversary date IEPs, which we're getting better at that because it's a yearly, you might have a couple of orders that change, and if they don't, they unlink and you have to relink them again. So it becomes complicated. So I can't tell you how much we look forward to the new enhanced system, because I believe that system, from what the demonstrations that they have provided, are going to give us quick data right at our fingertips and quickly and accurately. Sometimes we might get reports from Mike and then we have to dig. You have to literally dig and go into records and look at individual IEPs to check the related service log. This system will give us the opportunity to pull up any provider and see what their activity was for that day, for that week, even for, we're really excited about the enhancement. We're looking forward to, we've been working behind the scenes to get all the data in there so that they know what we want from the system. So I hope that answered your question. And there have been some progressive discipline where we collaborate with the Office of Human Capital to address staff that are not documenting their services.
All right, so there are probably a lot more questions that I can ask. I won't ask them all here. But you know, we've always had problems with documenting correct IEPs. Where I think, and you know, correct me if I'm wrong in terms of, you know, what I'm asking, it may not necessarily connect to Medicaid, but I'm thinking that if every student who has an IEP has some kind of, well, let me just say, in my view, every kid should have an IEP because that's his education plan. So in my view, but the way in which IEPs are used has to do with special education. Does that mean that every student who has an IEP with special education we get Medicaid dollars for that student?
Yeah, if I can answer that, President Elliott, students who are Medicaid eligible, so that information is confidential, and that's the SIN number that we receive through the applications when the matching process occurs. So if the student is eligible and receives the services and they're documented within our application and all the supporting documentations in place, our system will allow those services to be submitted for claiming to the state. So the eligibility determines if the students will be billed or not, and then the documentation will allow those claims to be submitted after they pass through those validation steps within the system.
All right, and then just one.
But I'm going to answer your question a little more detail. Not every service is every IEP is a Medicaid eligible service.
Okay.
It's only the related services. So it's occupational therapy, physical therapy, speech therapy, counseling services, and some nursing services. So it's not like you can bill for their special education program.
Okay.
It's only the related services.
And so one last question I have, you talked about, Mike, the DocuSign, the documents and needing to have original signatures. So how much money have we lost because we have not had the signatures or the DocuSign feature in place? Can you talk more about that? How much money have we lost with regard to that?
Yeah, so it had a total impact to the district, approximately just under $700,000. That was potentially available to the district. 232,000 of those dollars were actually when I mentioned that we halted the claims to make sure no additional claims go through. $232,000 claims did pass through, so we submitted voice for those claims during this process, and that still needs to be finalized. But the remainder of those dollars were potentially eligible and will not be submitted because we removed all the improper orders, so they won't pass through the validation or submitting for claiming.
So that's about 500,000 that you're talking about?
Nope, the money that I'm in total, if you were to say what was submitted and lost and what was potentially eligible, it would be about $650,000.
All right, thank you.
District share. So the generation of the revenue would be times 2 of that, but our share would be about $650,000.
Thank you.
Dr. Javo?
Hi, Mike. So I'm just a little curious. So you're the compliance officer in this area for Medicaid, and you have a requirement to report it a minimum of twice a year, right? So with this report, I want to hear kind of like the bottom line. What is it you want the commissioners to know about, number one, are children getting the services that they're supposed to get? Are we getting better, worse, or staying the same? Number two, is the district properly documenting all the services that children are getting? Are we getting better? Are we the same? Are we getting worse? And then number three, how is our revenue that's coming from reimbursement of Medicaid? Are we the same? Are we getting better? Or are we going worse? Just bottom line, is there progress? Are there areas where there's conflict? Are there areas where we really need to be worried and concerned because there's no progress?
I'd like to start with the revenue first and then move up the list. We have so much more available to us that we can bill for in our district. Above and beyond, when I say that, I mean above and beyond the $2.1 million. So not only addressing these 5 items that I listed here, but there are other items that we could address that goes into our second discussion where I had said our services being documented. Anything that occurs on the special education side for a student with an IEP must have various things in place for us to bill for Medicaid reimbursement when the student is eligible. If one of those documents are out of place, including providers' licenses, NPIs, names, updated, etc., we'll reject the claims and the validations will not allow them to pass through for submitting a claim. So the better that we do and the tighter that we work together and making sure we address anything on the special ed side, when the student is eligible and passes through those validations and the documents in place, it will submit those claims. Seeing that services are getting better, I gotta,
Wait, let me stop you there for a minute. So you're saying it's not just $700,000 lost, it's 2.1 million.
Nope. 2.1 million is traditionally what we budget for our Medicaid reimbursement. What I'm saying above and beyond that, there's a lot more money available for our school district for reimbursement. And we are already currently working to pull that information and the data to show information of what is the total eligible amount, breaking down what Desiree had shared about absenteeism, services that cannot be provided or lacking of supportive staff, and then breaking it down to a documentation reason. So we're already working to pull that data, but we feel that at least at a minimum, there's definitely $1 million on the table every year due to additional things that we can address in our district. And we're
Additional $1 million.
Yep.
So in that regard, you're saying we're not quite doing better.
Yes, some of the areas
Okay.
where I would like to point out is anniversary date IEPs not only impacted Medicaid, but there are several other areas that it's impacting on the financial side. We have seen personally ourselves in the Medicaid office in relation to specifically service orders where there is some confusion. They're writing an order, they'd have to write another order sometimes when a new IEP document is created. And sometimes if the frequency ratio or duration changes, you then have to write another prescription and service order, depending on what area it is. Again, the orders have to be written by licensed providers. So it's not just someone, a clerical can write these orders, but they do have to be written for the time of the IEP in a timely fashion. And they do require all the essential items.
But Mike, let me interject. With all of that, is the district doing that in an improved fashion? Or do we still, we need to mark off where we were, where we are today, and where we're going. How are we today in that regard, all those things you just described, compared to the last time you were here?
We are still talking about the same items as we compare those items. All the items on the list are pretty much similar to last time and do need to be addressed each individually.
Okay. And what if, okay.
So, but let me just follow up on that. So what do we, I don't know if there were any other hands up, and I apologize.
It's okay, President Elliott, go ahead.
So what are we doing to improve this? We can't be the same place we were last year. What are we doing in order to, why haven't we moved in the area of continuous improvement in this?
President Elliott, what we've done recently, like in this particular area with the service orders, we've recently worked with Desiree Richmond and her management. We met with them, did a sweep on all the missing orders, provided details. Desiree had passed it out to her management and has a tight deadline, I believe, by the end of the school year, they're making sure all staff reviews their records and anything that hasn't been written. And remember, our IEPs are written for one school year in this anniversary date. So there are some IEPs that can be receive a service order and support those claims today. So if the IEP has started, this month, it'll go 1 year forward. If there's a missing order, we broke it down by each student that's missing a document and it's submitted to her, and she had forwarded to her management staff. So that's already addressing the service orders themselves. Again, from year to year, we are seeing ups and downs, but as you can see, when I shared the service order document here, we started at 400,000 missing for our district share, and to date we're at 300,000. So did it drop 100,000? Yes, but 300,000 is still a lot of money on the table to say that we're making huge progress. I don't see us, near, the point of resolution yet. We still have a lot more work to do, but with Desiree Richmond in place, I've seen a lot of things take place where she's addressing a lot of these items immediately as we bring them to her attention.
We are, I know there's been great improvement, especially in the area of speech and language therapy with, we were having issues last year about just getting the service logged appropriately and signed in a timely fashion. There are so many rules, and like what Mike has expressed, that if one thing is missing, you cannot claim it. And there's many that can throw off one claim. But one of the things we've seen a huge improvement is that people are using the Medicaid, the log, and they are signing it much better, like much quicker, like within the 2-day window that we've given them. And that's where we've spent a lot of work this year in ensuring that that's happening. And then some of these other things that Mike is talking about, we're working on together. And like I said, I think it's very difficult to get the data right now without a lot of drilling down. So the new system, I think, will make a big difference.
I actually have some questions too, and I don't see any additional hands up. So my question is actually on the 1115 waiver. Mike, I'm not sure if you know about the waiver, have done any advocacy around it, but I certainly would be interested in understanding if we as an organization are doing any advocacy for ourselves on the waiver and how those Medicaid dollars will be spent. So I'll stop there before I go to the next question.
Vice President LeBron, I have not been in those discussions yet with the Big Five on the waiver. We have regular meetings with Jennifer Pyle and her team in all the Big Five districts, but there has not been discussions at this time regarding the waiver.
Mike, I may reach out to you separately then to connect you locally for those conversations with the Finger Lakes region, because they're happening now and the state is going to accept all the feedback, but eventually make decisions on what happens with those dollars. And educational institutions are allowed to advocate not only for just, it used to be district, so now it's going into the 1115 for the Medicaid dollars, but I do want to make sure that we as a Big Five for Rochester have some say in how those dollars are allocated, even for us. So just put a pin on that one. I'll do some follow-up with you on that, Mike. And then just want to uplift something else that you mentioned about in one of your, I think, second to last slide around the state advocacy that's potentially required or needed. And that would come from this board. So to look at that, to put in our legislative priorities for the upcoming year, to look at what the state has owed us or what the formula for funding is for reimbursement for us versus what they keep. And if we can advocate at the state level to perhaps flip that so that we are getting more dollars back within the district versus the state. And I say that because we really have to start looking at all ways that we can generate revenue, because our conversations are 100% always geared towards our deficit in the budget and deficit in the dollars. And yes, that exists, but we also have opportunities in very non-traditional ways to generate revenue as well. And I don't want us to lose sight of that this is an area through Medicaid where we could potentially generate additional revenues for this district based on the services that they are legally required to also pay and provide for, because that individual is Medicaid eligible. So that's all I want to say. I don't know if you want to add anything, Mike, to the state advocacy piece, but I'll let you.
I would. Thank you, Vice President LeBron. There are several items that we've identified, including that are on my list that on a Big Five level, I've also included in the past in the legislative breakfast. One of those items is the SIN, client identification number. The state has changed their process. They used to give us information where we can identify the eligible students, matching the names that are near matched. We no longer can do that. So that's where, Vice President LeBron, you had helped us connect us with Monroe County. We're waiting for a file to be returned actually this week, and I will report back to you on progress made there. These are students that we have that we can't match to their Medicaid. So we have several students that in the past, reporting would come from the central rec, we'd match up the names, even if there were close matches, near matches, and we'd be able to then make those correct with the demographic information and submit those claims. That's impacting all New York State schools. We've shared that with the Big Five organization, our state agencies, and trying to give us other ways of maybe possibly like the free and reduced lunch information. It has the Medicaid information in those files, but it doesn't have the number there. So we've been working several years now and trying to get that information from the Department of Health, State Education, but there are several other items like the breakdown of the cost report is additional revenue for our districts. Other things like parental consent. There has been discussions of saying at the point of applying for Medicaid and allowing other entities to be inclusive in the memo of agreement when they're applying for Medicaid to allow for that consent to help and support other government agencies. These are things that we've been talking about for years with the state, but we've seen very little traction, I would say, until recently on a few items now where Jennifer Pyle has brought some items and gave us some, look to the future that some things may be changing. For example, the free care. Students without IEPs may be billable in the future, and that'll be additional revenue for our district also. Again, there will be requirements. There will be new documentation that will be required in certain areas that we currently are not. Prescriptions and orders will also be required, which is one of the large items. And we have a challenge on making sure that we have them up to date and they're completed in an orderly fashion. The new applications have helped, though. The new applications have helped submission of those documents. So if I were to say if something's changing, that has changed in a good fashion. Why? Because we have an organized structure to submit those orders and prescriptions. They can only be electronically signed and copies go to ourselves and each department. So that is a positive, but I think there is more work that we can do to generate more revenue for our district that's out there.
Mike, I just want to add to something you just said. When individuals do apply for social services, especially locally, if they go to Monroe County, when they apply, they usually are giving consent to Monroe County to be able to reach out to a whole bunch of organizations, including the IRS. Most people don't read the fine print and do sign. They have to sign for the application. When they sign, you're signing, giving the Department of Human Services permission to communicate and obtain documentation for verification purposes from all of these organizations. That includes us, and I'm wondering if there's a way to have a conversation so that it's a two-way consent at that pinpoint as well, because they are allowed to reach out to us to ask for attendance for students, because that is part of the requirement of also getting social services, is that your student is attending school and they do look at the attendance piece. So just something to keep in mind for the future as well, is to figure out how can we ask them to be inclusive to us as a two-way. And then I think I asked this before, and this is my final question, is if you had access to e-paces, and I do think that there's some challenges with using e-paces to look up sins, and I get that piece because then you need all the other data points to identify someone. But transportation for folks on Medicaid, their database is actually more sensitive than e-paces. So even if I had a partial name, it can pull up a SIN and an address. And I'm wondering if we can also have some conversations to create a database that mirrors that level of database with all the SIN numbers at the state level, and see if we can have one specifically for schools and school districts in the state of New York.
Yeah, we are looking at particular files, the FERPA file that I previously mentioned, which is the free and reduced lunch file. So we are working to match up the database of the student's name and how they're spelled, the demographic, date of birth, et cetera. Again, there's a lot more work to be done because we're not matching all the students. We have shared this with the state actively. In addition, we also shared with the state on the parental consent issue. I do not believe, as I brought this to the Department of Health and State Education Department Medicaid units several times, we cannot use the county's parental consent release of information. It has to be by the entity of the district. Again, what we were talking about with them is if they're applying, then why can't there be a universal one that would work for both? But my understanding is at this time, you can't just use the particular release that they have on file. They would need an additional release for the school district. That is our understanding in the meetings that we had in the past with the Department of State Education.
All right, Mike, you always leave me with more questions. I won't be, I'm gonna do some follow-up with you. I do think that there is a way to actually navigate around that through systems integration. because we have been working at this through multiple entities of legal departments because everybody has different legal requirements, HIPAA education, the medical, it's just everybody has their own documentations. But something that I will bring up at that table for sure to see if we can do a workaround. So thank you, both Mike and Desiree, for presenting and answering questions, taking some of the hard ones today. And I look forward to meeting up with you as well.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, up next, I'm going to give an update very quickly, and then I'll jump over to Dr. Myers-Smalls and Vern to talk about the transparency report and just give everybody an update and a review on it. I met with Vern and Kalia to discuss one of the challenges that we had this year was budget calendars, if you will. So the board had a budget calendar that we amended a few times, but initially voted on some query. There was some back and forth internally on what their calendar looked like. But then we also have a number of financial policies that require reports and additional reports that we have asked for as a board. And so rather than have all of these different outstanding number of items month to month, we're gonna layer all of the calendars into one master calendar that will be both public and internal facing. So internally we'll know when some things are due, but externally to the public and to the board, they will know when things are due in terms of reports, presentations, when our budget cycle starts, when internally the administration is starting to like navigate through their own budget process. And one, I do think this will help all of us have all of the information all in one consolidated document, if you will. But month to month, we'll be also anticipating what should be being reported to the board in terms of financial reports. For example, we do the quarterly reports from legal. That's on a separate calendar than the budget, and all of those things really should be in one place. So we're working on that, and hopefully we should have a draft of what that's going to look like for the August finance meeting. There is no finance meeting in July. We'll just give the report at the board business meeting. Is there any questions around that piece? Okay. Vern and Dr. Myers-Smalls, I'm going to turn it over to you actually for the review of the transparency report.
Sure, I'll provide just a brief introduction and then I'll have Vern Connors go into more of the nuts and bolts specific pieces. So each school district is responsible for and required to submit documentation relative to financial transparency. And so this is really about the fact of maximizing every dollar to make sure that we're providing the best outcomes and opportunities for our scholars, certainly in our district. And so this reporting requires us to outline how much each school is spending per student and the source of the funds. And so Vern has been working on that process. We needed to finalize from last school year, and he's on track for completing for next school year. So Vern, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Myers-Small. As mentioned, now all school districts are required to provide the transparency reporting, and what they're reporting are their adopted budgets. And basically you break it down into various categories at the school level. You break out regular ed, special education, English language learners, preschool. You provide a lot of enrollment data along those lines as well by school and by student type. And we did submit that last fall. And what the state ed then does with that is they look at the data and they compare it year to year. And what they do is they try to, what comes of that, looking at the current year budget or the prior year budget, they identify significant variances or numbers that simply don't don't on their surface make sense. For instance, we may project enrollment going up and the cost going down or vice versa. So as a result of that, then the state will send out those types of questions that you get caught in their analysis, and the districts are required to respond to that. We were due to respond to that in December. I'm not sure why we did not. I do know that when it came to my attention, and I probably should have attended to it sooner than I did, but there were 11 questions and 9 had been answered. And then the folks working on it just kind of stopped there. They didn't reach out. They didn't say, hey, we got 2 more. We don't know what to do. So I got involved with it and kind of checked all of our answers. I edited a couple of the 9, and then we did the research and got the information for the remaining 2. And in some of the answers, some of the things that you can do, you can change your responses. So for instance, you may have a schedule of enrollment, like our ELL projections were very high. That was one of the questions. And what we did in that case, when we got the current ELL enrollments and put those in, which kind of then took that variance out, if you will. So when we submitted the 11 answers, the state accepted 8 of them and returned 3 of them for additional information. One of them was my fault. I simply typo in the wrong year. Their additional information said, did you mean 21, 22 instead of 2021? And it was yes. And another one, it had to do with UPK funding and student enrollment. And in our initial answer, I sat with and met with Dr. Robin Hooper and Sue Menz, and we talked about all the things that happened in the UPK program between 2021 and 21-22, all the differences and changes, and we wrote that answer. The question was, why are the budgets different? So they kind of said, okay, we need more information because it didn't really answer that question. And we went back and we finally figured out what happened in the 2021 budget the previous year was there was a plan to have a second centralized administrative center for UPK, which drove that budget up significantly. And then it was just then when we went into that year, what actually transpired is after about a month or so, there was very little use of that center and it was closed. So long story short, we did submit the responses for the additional 3 questions, and those were accepted. So we have completed the 21-22 transparency reporting. As a result of that experience, we started planning for the 22-23 report, which will be due on September 3rd. I met with Terry Hassler, our director of budget, and Dave Adams, who is kind of our #1 guy in the budget area. And we kind of reviewed what we did, where we fell short, what information we need, what sources we have to get them from. So we've already started the process of gathering the data for the reporting for September. So we anticipate being able to submit that. What we anticipate coming back from the state, however, will be the following. There will be variances all over the report year to year, simply because this year's report will include ARP and CRISA funding where the previous year did not. So that's going to be, I anticipate there'll be a lot of questions. Why is this number so much bigger, ARP and CRISA? Why is this number so much bigger, ARP and CRISA? It's going to be across the board, but that's where we are with the transparency reporting. And I'll be glad to answer any questions you may have.
I don't see any questions. I just want to put out there.
You froze, Vice President LeBron. Is it just me?
No, it's
Okay.
not just you.
Okay,
I don't know if she's able to hear us.
okay.
There too. I don't know if all the commissioners got a report. Can you hear me?
No,
You froze.
you froze and then you were all a jumble of voice there. Can you hear us?
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me?
A little bit. You're breaking up
It's
still.
garbled.
How about now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. I'm having internet issues and I apologize. I'm gonna try to keep the camera off and see if that helps. So no, the reason I wanted this on here is because we did face not being potentially paid out some money from the state, and I don't want us to be in this position again in the future. This will be part of the master calendar that we're building together across all of our departments in terms of policies but reports that are due that are tied to policies for the finance piece. Vern and his team's dates, our dates for the board, and this one master calendar, if you will. So if there are no other questions, I'm gonna move on to the next piece, which is going to be the second reading of the wellness policy. So with that, I'm gonna turn it over to Commissioner Powell.
Okay, everybody see and hear me? This should go very brief, very quickly. This policy did already pass through the policy committee. We heard from the public during the policy committee meeting. We've had our first reading. This is the second reading. If there are questions, they truly should have been raised by now. It's very well supported by the community. And with this second reading, we are able to vote on the policy amendment and update at our Thursday board meeting, Thursday, the 23rd. Are there any questions, comments? If not, I return the gavel to you, Commissioner LeBron.
Thank you. I didn't see any hands raised. I'm gonna go off camera. Can you all hear me? Okay. So up next is gonna be the board meeting poll. I believe that there is a link that you can open to take the poll. But in the meantime, we are going to go into a quick and executive session tonight. And so I do need a motion to go into executive session for the matters leading to the appointment or employment of a particular person or corporation. Can I get a motion?
So move.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Got to be on camera, Commissioner Patterson, please. Thank you.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Are we coming out of executive session to vote on anything? So then
No,
we're
there
probably going
isn't.
from there.
No, there isn't anything to vote on. Commissioner Simmons, I'm not seeing you on screen, so I wouldn't be able to take your vote. Sorry. Thank you.
Okay, so that wraps up for us for the finance committee then. We'll go out of executive session and call it a night. So I'm gonna call it a night tonight for the public for this portion of the meeting. And that concludes the finance meeting for June 2022. Congratulations to all of the graduates graduating between last week and this week. You will see many of the commissioners at the graduations, especially those for the board liaisons. But I just want to wish you all congratulations and to their parents. Well, very exciting week for them. And then with that, have a good night.